put it on a loop at the office and drive everyone crazy. So thank you all. These are the true and the hardy folks that are still here. Everybody get some great gems today? Indeed. The only one that puzzled me was the one from the podcast. You know, that one about every day you look in the mirror and your 70-year-old self looks back at you. I thought, no shit. You know? And it looks better than I do, so I couldn't quite figure that one out. So, I'm not going to talk a lot about myself, because it's a very long story, too long for tonight. Suffice it to say, I've been in business long enough to make every mistake at least once, and hopefully not more than one. But I've spent a lot of time in various businesses, from single-person startups to Fortune 100 companies, and some of the things are consistent throughout those, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I've spent years as a business and investors coach, and the last few years with Wayne at Hero Nation, which, there you go, founded a home away from home. And so, without further ado, we'll talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. So, realtors like questions. Coaches love questions. So we'll start off with a question. What do you work? Now, don't get nervous. We aren't going to make everybody stand up and go around the room and tell us. We're just going to talk about it. But we're going to talk mostly about how to increase that value, because it's under your control. So, why, we always ask, is it so easy to see some people really have a measurable value that everybody understands. Okay? We know what they're worth. But at the same time, it's hard to see what we're worth. Everyone has a value. We just don't really know what it is. We can't put a finger on it. So how do we determine that? Well, first thing people always ask me, are we talking about money? Think so? Of course we are. But that's only because money is the universal measure that's used to judge how successful we are at what we do. Fair or unfair, it is. I've been spending about the last 35 years in East Central Illinois, and I guarantee you everyone else measures it that way there. East Central, you can tell I'm from East Central Illinois by the Hawaiian shirt. It's all a state of mind. Anyone who's been to East Central Illinois would know what I mean by that. You are where you want to be, okay? So, the world judges us by that. And somebody who I like to quote a lot, Earl Nightingale, I mean, you who aren't familiar with him, he goes back quite a ways. One of the greatest storytellers ever in our kind of self-improvement business. As he always says, it's like cause and effect. Money is an effect. It's the result of a cause, and the cause is valuable service. So that's what we're really talking about. Money is just a measure of opportunity. I don't think there's anybody here in this room that if they had more money wouldn't do some of the very similar things. It would be a better lifestyle for ourselves, better opportunities, better environment for our family. It would give us the security that we want in life and the ability to help others. And the last one that several people talked about today, the ability to give back in ways that we otherwise couldn't. Okay? So the quality of our life is not determined by how much money we have, but by what we choose to do with our money. But that makes money an important thing to all of us. So, to be successful, you have to make a lot of money. The answer to that one is no. It's actually the other way around. I'm going to go back to Earl again. And success is not the result of making money. Earning money is the result of success. Okay? Success is in direct relation to our service and the value of our service. So it comes the other way around. The more successful you are, the more money you'll make. You become an attractor. So the world will pay you exactly what you bargained for, exactly what you earn, not a penny more. That is the reality of life for all of us. So what does that mean for you and me? Well, over time, life will not allow you to be underpaid for the value of what you're doing. Now, all of us know people who are in that situation. They are working hard, they're playing by the rules, they're doing everything they should, and they just aren't making it yet. For coaches, that's one of our biggest frustrations. We see people who are this far away from success and about to give up, where if they keep at it, we also know that most of these people who are doing things right, eventually they succeed, and often in a big way. On the other side of that coin, over time, life will not allow you to be overpaid. We also all know people who they're breaking it in, but they're cutting corners and skating deals and doing all manner of shady things with their employees, but they're being successful. Now, when I mention that, if the person who comes to mind is in the room, please do not shout out their name or point to them, because that always upsets the whole presentation. But we all know people like that. And we also know that generally, it ends badly for them eventually. Karma catches up with you. Our rewards in life will always match our service. So it stands to reason that if we wish to increase our rewards, we've got to first increase our service. Thank you. So our rewards in life, if you don't remember anything else, remember this. The amount of money we receive is always in direct ratio to three things. The demand for what we do, our ability to do it, and to the difficulty of replacing it. The third one's kind of a catcher sometimes. But it's those three things that determine our value. No more, no less. So, what determines that value? Okay, obviously all of us, from a spiritual sense, we are all equal human beings with equal value. That's not a question. But what we earn is determined by the value of our service. That is the unfairness and the balance of life. So let's say we take this and we're going to create a little hospital situation here. We've got two people working in that hospital, equal human beings, not equal values to the world, right? There's a little leverage in some jobs, no matter how well you're doing or how long you're doing. So if you're on the housekeeping staff at our hospital here, what's the demand for what you do? Well, it's pretty high. You need a clean, sanitary hospital. What's your ability to do it? You could be the greatest person on that staff, without question. But what's the difficulty of replacing it? Okay? If somebody leaves the job today, what's it going to take? 15 days? Probably not. Probably more like 15 hours. Or maybe 15 minutes. You can be replaced easily. That lowers the value. Now on the other side, let's say they're on the surgical staff. Let's make this our quintessential brain surgeon, since we're always talking about brain surgery and what isn't brain surgery. But what is brain surgery is what this individual does. So what's the demand for what they do? Well, if you need surgery on your brain, you pretty much need a brain surgeon. You know, a carpenter or an accountant or even a good orthopedic surgeon won't do. You need a brain surgeon. What's their ability to do it? So they could be the worst brain surgeon on the staff, and they're still better than anybody else who get to do the job, right? And what's the difficulty of replacing it? Well, somebody who leaves that staff, you can take the smartest kid coming out of high school this month. They're going to spend 4 years in undergrad, another 4 in med school, and then the internship and residency for neurosurgery is another 7 years. 15 years. 15 years versus 15 minutes. Okay? Now, the last year and a half or so, Cancer and I have been doing a battle about to a draw right now. But I'll guarantee you, every facility I was in, I liked the fact that they were clean and sanitary. I was a lot more concerned about the credentials of the radiologist that was there than how clean the floors were. And I can also guarantee you, every time I saw one of those bills come through, all the zeros that came after the crooked numbers were for the radiologist, not for the janitorial staff. Right? That's the way life is. So we look at that and say, okay, how do we increase our value? All right? We increase it by improving our ability, the way we service. So, if we increase our ability to do it, this, interestingly enough, is the only thing we can intentionally increase. Now, it's all those old-fashioned things like learning the scripts, doing role plays, getting better at our listing presentation. It's the nuts and bolts of what we do. We can make ourselves better at that. If we do, as our ability grows, the difficulty of replacing us becomes higher. We're a valuable resource. People want us around. And the demand for what we do also goes up. As you become more unique at exactly what you do, you become much harder to replace. Right? So, how can we continue to grow? Let's use an example. Any MJ fans here? Well, you should be, the rest of you. We'll take him for example. So, when Michael Jordan started in the NBA in 1984, his value to the NBA was $550,000. He had no endorsement or business value, so his total earnings were $550,000. Not a bad income. Although I'll guarantee you, I know a bunch of realtors in this room who make more money than that and probably practice less. Okay? So, good income, not great. So how do you enhance that? Well, in this case, it could be steady growth doing the same thing. So perfecting what he did over the next 10 years, he has increased his value in the NBA to $3.85 million a year. He's also gotten into endorsements and business deals where he's making another $12 million. So he upped his annual income to almost $16 million. By improving his value for the service he performed, which was playing basketball and being in business. Now, you can take your game to a whole new level, breaking through that barrier. Now, a couple of championships, and that's kind of what he did in the 97 season. That's the year they paid him over $33 million, which, as I recall at the time, was actually more than the combined salaries of the players on almost any other team in the NBA. He was also making $20 million in endorsements and business deals, but he was making $53 million annually by improving his skills. Now, occasionally, you decide maybe you need to step out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you don't want to do that for very long, okay? And in MJ's case in 98, he stepped away from basketball, so his value to the NBA was zero. He might disagree with me, but his value to MLB was pretty much zero too. Fortunately, he was still making $25 million a year from endorsements and business. His teammates thanked him too because he upgraded the bus they traveled in and probably picked up the dinner tab most of the time. So, if you make a mistake stepping out of that comfort zone, the thing to do, step back. So you can always go back to basics, rebrand yourself. And that's what he did in 2002. He was only making $1 million in salary, but that's because he had an ownership position. MLB still wasn't paying him anything. But his endorsements and his business interests were paying him $45 million a year. One of the most interesting things I see about that picture is that apparently in 2002, Washington, D.C. was fine with a professional team named Bullet, which seems little odd in this day and age. But we'll leave that where it is. So if you focus on your strengths like he did and work through the progression, by 2014 he was completely out of basketball. Fortunately, he was still out of baseball. But his endorsement business was making him $80 million a year. He had taken that to the level of professionalism that he could. So he had increased his value by improving his abilities and becoming unique with the service he provided. There's always going to be a demand for sports figures, marketing people. That kind of starved for him. He had become pretty unique performer as a basketball player, but also in his marketing. And so he had become, how about the difficulty of replacing it? For most of the sponsors and the companies that were working with him, he was the one and only. He becomes irreplaceable. That's a heck of a value. And in case you're worried, he's still doing okay. There hasn't been a slide. He still actually makes more annual revenue than any current or former sports figure does. And his net worth hovers somewhere around the $2 billion mark. So he's doing okay. So, we used to talk about this with business. And at one time that would have been the end. But, a lot of years of experience, a little bit of Hero Nation, etc., have taught a lot of us to realize that the quality of life is not just about business. Matter of fact, sometimes it's not at all about business. So are you willing to peel another layer or two? Okay. So, how many in here have a friend? Everybody doesn't raise their hand. Wayne is taking down your names because you need help. Okay. So, we all have friends. But one of the sad things about friends is sometimes the more friends we have, the less we feel required to do for them. Kind of friend rich. So, what's the demand for what we do? To be somebody's friend? Nobody would ever turn down somebody being a new friend. Why would they? Okay. But, what is our ability to do it? You heard different people talk about this today in the same vein. What sometimes happens, are we focusing on the best interest of our friends or just the best interest of ourselves? When they're doing something that we enjoy, we're there. But when it's something they enjoy, we're busy, we're tied up, we don't feel well. We're not doing maybe what we should be to nurture that friendship and increase the value. So what happens is, there's an old saying, you can't lose a friend, you can only give them away. And oftentimes we do. And if we're in that sort of situation, will they replace us? Sure. A good friend is next to impossible to replace, but an absent friend is not. So maybe let's take one more layer on that, okay? How many of you have a spouse or partner in a deep relationship? If there's been more than one, just still raise one hand. That's all that we're going to talk about, okay? So, if relationships all continued the way they started, there'd be a lot of perfect relationships, wouldn't there? Because when we look at the demand for what we do, the other half of our relationship, is there a demand for us to be there? For sure. No relationships break up because of too much tension. Have you ever heard somebody say, if they don't stop supporting me and doing things for me, my ass is out of here? No. But our ability to do it, to be in that relationship, do we treat it as a skill? Do we do things like the language of love? Do we actually try and get better at our relationships, or do we just ride it out until we hit our pension? You know, that's a question we all need to ask ourselves, because the difficulty of replacing us changes. Okay? What used to be thought to be impossible now becomes inevitable. We've all seen relationships that go from, every 5 minutes they need a room, to being, all of us who's in real estate have been at that closing where the listing couple is getting a divorce and we need 2 separate closing rooms. That was that same couple that couldn't stay away from each other for 5 minutes. What changed? And where's our responsibility in those relationships to grow and increase our value? Then maybe the most important layer. How about a child? How many here have kids? Super. This is probably, in my opinion, the most important relationship because it's the one where we're the most powerful. And with power comes responsibility. So we have a lot of responsibility in a relationship like this. It demands for what we do. As a parent, we're absolutely essential to the development of those kids as people. There's no question about that. The difficulty of replacing us, there are substitutes, but there's no actual substitute for your parent. There are some wonderful stand-ins, people who can pick up the slack. But a village may help raise kids, but that's not the primary place. It's the parents. And then our ability to do it. Man, this is the only job you will ever have that you can't lose. Right? Now, any of you who've raised teenagers have seen the sight of their back going down the driveway, having just informed you that you ruined their life and they're never speaking to you again. But they never say you're fired, because they can't. Right? So, does this put a lot of responsibility on us? You betcha. You betcha. So, my recommendation to you, if you want to do something, start with your children, no matter what age. I have a 40-year-old child who still needs a parent relationship at different times. Okay? But I recommend treat each one as an individual, because each of your kids needs something different from you. And all too often, we make that new pledge, the New Year's resolution. You got 4 kids at home. I'm going to go home and spend an hour playing with the kids every night. That's great. Except one of those kids may need you to play with. One of them may need you to help them with their homework if they're struggling with it. One of them may just want to spend some alone time with you playing catch in the yard. And one of them may just want to talk to you endlessly about towers and dragons and princesses and not have you make funny faces at them. Okay? Whatever they need, it's our job to give that child what that child needs. Make it individual. And if you don't have any children, it's not wasted effort on another relative, partner, somebody who works for you, somebody you work for. Try that with all the people in your world. What could you do to make that relationship better? To increase your value. So, remember that making that sort of a change is not the end. It's a process. It's not an event. When I first put this together, this is my grandson who was about 10 years old then. So I had a grandfather relationship with him that consisted of things that it would be with a 10-year-old. Okay, hockey coaching and scouting and listening to all the dumbassery that a 10-year-old talked about all the time and enjoying it with him. So with me, he had permission to be as dopey as he wanted to be, and I might join in with him. You never know. At times, he used to differentiate between his grandfathers. When he was a little kid, he called me his silly grandpa, which is a title I was proud to have because we were having fun. Now, things change. He was also one of the kids here a couple of years ago who became one of the seniors who missed their senior year because of COVID. So no classes, no baseball, no graduation, no commitment, no proms, nothing. And even the direction he was going to go, he was headed to college for kind of a pre-med ROTC. He was planning on going into the service. Even that wasn't working out, so he flipped it. Went into the service. And right now, that was him, one of those is him mugging a little bit when he got his TFC a few months ahead of schedule. That's him and some of his buddies from his squad working out, where he is currently stationed in Hawaii for 3 years, which is a hardship all the way around. But do you think he needs a different relationship with his grandparents? You betcha. And if we don't change with it, we leave that relationship behind. So, work on increasing your value, those around you, and I will guarantee your business will improve at the same rate you improve those relationships. Thank you all for sharing some time with me today. Be your own hero.